The Siege of Kvatch is one of the most brutal and destructive moments in Oblivion Remastered. It is what happens when a great Oblivion gate is opened and a siege machine is brought into the city to destroy everything. So I decided that since the hero of Kvatch canonically breaks the Siege of Kvatch and saves the day, I thought I would do an analysis of sort of the aftermath of what happens and sort of the financials of how much it would cost to rebuild Kvatch to where it was before the siege happened. So we're going to do a little bit of lore conjecture here and a little bit of estimating to see how much it would cost in septums to rebuild Kvatch to what it was beforehand. And before joining me on this lore deep dive, it would mean a lot if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me make more of this content. Thank you. The Siege of Kvatch is one of the earliest missions that you do during the main quest of Oblivion. After having what I would say sort of a classic RPG experience of the tutorial and sort of being called the Chosen One by the Emperor, who then is slain by the Mythic Dawn, and you're sent on your mission to take the Amulet of Kings to Joffrey and Wayne Priory. Everything is sort of going along at you would consider a normal fantasy RPG pace. When you get to Wayne Priory, you meet Joffrey, who gives you a great lore, sort of a little bit of a lore dump on the Amulet of Kings and what it all means for the Empire and how important it is that the dragon fires are relit to save Cyrodiil from being invaded by Daedra. He also gives you the information on Uriel Septim's illegitimate son, Martin, who he took care of and is now a priest in Kvatch. And as he says, it's important for you to find Martin and bring him back to hopefully save the Empire from the Daedra invasion caused by the Mythic Dawn. So you head to Kvatch, and you've already been beaten to the punch as the Siege of Kvatch has already begun. And Salvian Martis gives you a little bit of a rundown on what happened and has you go into the gate to help stop the invasion. And this is sort of your first introduction to an Oblivion portal, and it's a little bit of a tutorial, but also I would say it's actually pretty freeform, and I would say many people probably get lost in that very first Oblivion portal because they don't really hold your hand through this dungeon. That is very much you got to figure out what you need to do type of a situation, and it actually is quite a long trip. But eventually you close the gate, you then break the Siege of Kvatch, you find Martin in the chapel, and then you continue on with Salvian Martis, and you take the rest of the city and find that the Count has been murdered by Daedra, but at least you won in the sense that all the Daedra have been wiped out from Kvatch, and now you have Martin and you can continue on your quest to save Cyrodiil. And that brings us to the part of the story where the hero of Kvatch isn't involved, which is the rebuilding of Kvatch. So the first thing that I sort of thought about when trying to think about how to rebuild Kvatch, I thought, well, it's sort of important to find a comparison city of similar size to use as a benchmark as far as replacing things. So by looking at the map, it seems like Coral is a very similarly sized city in comparison to Kvatch. And I use that as sort of a benchmark to compare it with how to rebuild it. And in Coral, there is 50 people, including 12 guards. There's 50 people and 12 guards in Coral. So I think we can safely assume that Kvatch has a similar amount of people. And then here's a little bit of hunting that I did going through Kvatch after breaking the siege, is I was able to count how many buildings there are. And it seems like there's about 29 buildings that have been destroyed during the Siege of Kvatch. And so I decided to try and figure out how much the average home in Cyrodiil costs. And what I did is I took all of the numbers of every single house that you can buy in the game, add them all up together, and then divided by the number of homes that you can buy to get to the average amount of money a home costs in Cyrodiil. So the average home in Cyrodiil costs 11,000 septums. And so there's 29 total homes, and that brings us to a total of 319,000 septums to replace all of the homes in Kvatch. Now another important thing is the lives lost in the Siege of Kvatch. So like I said before, there was 50 people in Coral plus 12 guards, and there's a total of about 16 survivors from the Siege of Kvatch. And I tried to estimate what the average cost of a humanoid's life is in Cyrodiil. Now, unlike Morrowind, where slavery is legal, it's sort of hard to put a price on a human life. But looking at how many people you kill out in the wild, it's probably actually not that high. But I decided to use a similar benchmark for how I figured out at the average home price. I decided to go to the place where the best they buy and trade in human lives, which is the arena. So I decided to take all of the cash payouts that you receive in the arena and then divide it by the number of fights you have. And so it seems like you add it all up together, and the average humanoid life in Cyrodiil costs about 250 septums, which is actually kind of low. And so to replace all of the human capital in Kvatch, you would need about 8,500 septums, because you need to have 34 survivors. Now, another person that we've lost in Kvatch, not through the siege, but through retirement, is Salvian Martis, who decides to retire after breaking the siege. And this one, there is not really any super hard and fast rule on this. I just decided to go off of just sort of a well-capable fighter from the Fighters Guild is probably going to cost about 1,000 septums to do a really good job. So I just decided to go with that. Now, another thing is every city in Cyrodiil has horses. So they've lost all of their horses in the Siege of Kvatch, so it's important that we replace all those horses. Now, I decided to use a very similar formula to how I figured out the average home price and the average human's life price, which is I basically just took every single type of horse you can buy's price and then divided it by the number of horses that there are. So that number, I got to 2,600 septums per horse, which is actually kind of surprising that a horse is more expensive than a human life, but you know, I don't make the rules here, so it seems like the average horse is going to cost you about 2,600 septums. Now, if you go off of sort of the average of all the properties and the different cities and the different stables, it seems like the average stable probably has around 10 horses, so we're going to say it's going to be about 26,000 septums to replace all the horses in Kvatch. Once again, it's kind of surprising that horses are going to cost more than humans, but once again, I don't make the rules. This is just how the game runs. Now, we're pretty in the hole right now as far as paying for all these things to rebuild Kvatch. Fortunately, the walls are still up, the chapel is still there, the castle for the most part is still there, so those are actually pretty big expenses that honestly probably just need a little bit of maintenance, so that's not super bad. But we have one thing that actually might bring in some money for us, and that is who is going to replace the Count of Kvatch. And one thing that we do know is that being a count is something that you can buy. And that's what we learned from the Count of Shadenhall, Indaris. Count Indaris is a Lalu trader from Morrowind who is best friends with King Helseth from Morrowind. And this is how he was able to get the count position in Shadenhall, is because he is very wealthy and has good connections. So we know that you can buy yourself into nobility here. Now the real question is how much does it cost to buy your way into nobility? So the most expensive house that you can buy in the game is 88,000 gold, which is a lot. It's a good amount of gold. Like, try to make 88,000 septums in the game. That's pretty hard to do. It takes a long time to get there without glitching or something. So I think from extrapolating from that you're basically buying the castle of the city. The nicest house you can buy in the game is 88,000. You probably are going to have to spend 250,000 septums to become a count. But I think we're probably going to have to give this countship at a discount because, like we're discussing, Kvatch has been totally destroyed, and so we need to get it back to where it was before. And so I'm going to say we're probably going to need to give this count title away at a discount. So instead of 250,000 septums, it's probably going to be about 125,000 septums, just because it's kind of like a fixer-upper type situation where you're going to have to put a lot of work into it to make it a full city again. So whoever takes over being the count, that's kind of going to come with the territory of taking the job, basically. But that does help cut into our expenses, because Counting up the survivors, replacing the homes, the horses, and the captain of the guard, you're looking at about 354,000 septums. But if you subtract selling the count ship away, you're now down to 229,500 septums, which is actually kind of seems like a lot of money, considering the fact that the homeless people in Oblivion tell you that they could eat for a day on a single coin. Now, if a human needed to eat for a single day, you're probably looking close to $10 or so. So that is actually a fair amount of money in this reality's dollars. So it's probably going to be a long process, and hopefully the Imperial coffers have the money to help rebuild Kvatch and bring it back to where it was. Which, I mean, apparently they do, because I guess by the time the Great War happens, Kvatch is back to its normal self again and is helping the Empire in the Great War. And from what we understand in Skyrim is that it's back to being just a normal city by this point. So it seems like there at least was money to rebuild and bring Kvatch back to where it was before. And there's some interesting history to Kvatch itself. I always thought the armor that you got at the end of breaking the Siege of Kvatch was really cool and something that I held on to for a lot of the game. And I thought it was really cool because of the coat of arms of sort of the fox, but it's actually supposed to represent a dire wolf. And it got that reputation because I guess Kvatch was known for training dire wolves, something that we learn about in the ESO book, Guide to Taming Dire Wolves. Do you laugh when you see dire wolves? Do you think they are big, dumb cousins of normal wolves? Then you are stupid. Dire wolves are cunning and deadly. To them, your laughter says, I am the next thing to fill your belly. Shelga laughed at dire wolves once. Now Shelga has one ear. Shelga is no longer stupid. Now Shelga is Beastmaster of Kvatch, the city with the dire wolf banner. This is why Shelga spends much time taming dire wolves. You may think it is impossible to tame dire wolves. This is true. Predators cannot be tamed. Not really. But if Shelga called it a guide to making dire wolves eat your enemies and not you, no one would purchase, or purchase for the wrong reasons. First thing, a dire wolf looks like a wolf. It moves like a wolf. It smells like a wolf. But it is not. It is a dire wolf. Sounds easy, but easy to forget. A wolf needs a pack. A wolf with no pack is vicious. It is afraid to be alone. With effort, you can tame a wolf. Give it food if it is hungry. Make it think it is part of your pack. A dire wolf needs no pack. This is because a dire wolf is one whole wolf pack. It is vicious only if it wants to be. It is not afraid to be alone because it is a dire wolf. You cannot tame a dire wolf like a wolf. If it is ever hungry, you are food. It needs no pack but itself. You must show it you are a pack as well. Show how your pack and its pack should travel together for more food. A dire wolf understands this because it eats as much as one whole wolf pack. Second thing, a dire wolf has a long memory. It is like a clan mother with grudges from 40 years ago. Don't give it reason to hate you. Shelga's sister, Grolog, once slapped a dire wolf for eating off her plate. This is how Grolog lost a thumb and learned manners at the same time. Grolog doesn't visit Kvatch anymore. If a dire wolf comes to hate you, you do not back down. Do not cower. Show it you know its hate. Show it you don't fear its hate. This shows respect. Then give it much food to smother the hate. Shelgo thinks this is why Kvatch puts the dire wolf on its flag. Kvatch does not forget. Kvatch respects those who show it respect. And Kvatch will smother its hate if you throw its people many banquets. Sometimes the dire wolf still hates you. Then you must kill the dire wolf. Do not do it in sight of a dire wolf's mate, or it will hate you too, just like people. Third thing, scratch the belly. Scratch behind the ear, but not in the ear. Scratch where the tail meets the back. Top part of tail only. Scratch below the chin. Do not scratch the paws. Dire wolf paws are sensitive like high elves. Also, they have sharp claws. When a dire wolf thinks you want to take its paw away, it will come to hate you. Last thing, a dire wolf is clever, but it doesn't understand magic. So use magic. Scrolls are cheaper than a false hand. Don't try to tame a dire wolf like in the stories. Don't be stupid. Shelga's sister Bolg says this is cheating, that a dire wolf made tame by magic is not a dire wolf. Shelga calls Bolg many names. Bolga does not back down, earning Shelga's respect. Then Bolga sends Shelga boiled thunderbug eggs. Shelga says that if even Bolga can learn, so can you. So we learn that Kvatch sort of has a vicious history of being strong fighters and taming dire wolves, which is very interesting because from the first era, Kvatch and Skingrad worked together to overthrow the very first empire of humans, the Elysian Empire, back in the First Era. Sort of a longer story, which we will get into when I do a deep dive into the lore of Skingrad, because that was mostly a Skingrad thing. But Kvatch was an important part of that. Kvatch also has a dark and sort of sinister history with Lord Falia, the lost Fort Falia. Legend has it that in the early days of Cyrodiil, in the wake of the Elysian doctrines, there were 3 lords that formed a regency council over the kingdom of Kvatch. The name of that king and the 2 lords are lost to history. Lord Falia's name, however, is a whisper in the night as a cautionary tale of how far one would go to protect those they love. As a young man, Lord Falia secretly and to the shame of his family fell in love with an elven scholar, wise in the ways of dark magic and necromancy. The Netala Aliads swore fealty to the Empire, but their people were still an unwelcome sight in polite society. Together they pored over lost secrets, hoping to find a way to be together always. They married in secret and enjoyed a few short years of happiness, which ended with an imperial decree. To hide his wife from the purge, Lord Falia expanded his fortress into the underground tunnels beneath the structure. They enlarged the space with magic, the sweat of hired workers and the help of a tribe of minotaurs. It was to be a grand underground complex to match those of his wife's Aliad ancestors, and equally as brutal. As each wing was completed, they secretly had the workers put to death. Some were buried, some had the life drawn out of them to extend the lives of Lord Falia and his wife. Of these, some were raised as undead guardians. After all, Lord Falia could not allow rumors and secrets to get out, and dead guardians spread no tales. As the complex grew, so did Lord Falia's family. He swore to do anything to protect his children, these elven children, from death or banishment at the hands of the Empire. It was during the birth of their 3rd child that Lady Falia died. In mourning, his lordship erected a great brass tomb in the tunnels, sealing his love away and promising to do anything to protect her children from the religious zealots of the Empire. At this time, Lord Falia delved deeper into the studies of dark arts, formulating wicked magic fueled by a darkness from some far realm that consumed all good things and light. He learned to channel the power and found it all but limitless. Lord Falia edged closer and closer to madness. After the death of his elven wife, though, he could never explain his troubles to his peers in the outside world. To keep his elven family a secret, he continued to use disposable labor to expand their realm and give them new comforts. The children grew into adults, rarely seeing sunlight. Well into adulthood, his youngest son could not take his confinement any longer. He managed to escape and did so easily and often. Inevitably, as these things happened, the son fell in love with a merchant's daughter. Soon she was with child. The girl's family, horrified at the child's elven traits, forced the young woman to confess that her lover was Lord Falia's son. Horrified at being discovered, Lord Falia took his grandson and hid him with the rest of the family. The Empire was at his gate within days, with charges ranging from treason to giving aid to the enemy. For these crimes against the Empire, he had no defense, but he had prepared to respond for this day. In his madness, Lord Falia performed a dark ritual. If he could not be with his family, he would rather destroy everything he created and the Imperial army along with it. The night came, the ritual concluded. It would take only one final gesture to consume the entire castle in eternal darkness. At the final moment, a hand fell upon his shoulder. His son was behind him, standing with the rest of the family. It was too late. The very shadows crawled like smoke from the ground, dissolving objects, walls, men, and myrrh. Some formed man-like shapes and attacked the besieging army from within. Others opened up like rifts, and the world fell inside them. When it was over, only Lord Falia remained amid the freshly made ruins. As the legends say, he buried his children and grandchildren on the surface, where he never allowed them to go. Then he retreated into the hole in the ground, sealing it behind him. For most great men, the walls and monuments survive far longer than their name. For Lord Falia, the location of his fort is lost to time, but his name remains. So sort of an interesting story about the dark histories of Kvatch and this Lord Falia. It sort of shows that the pendulum kind of swings. Sort of pre the Elysian Empire, the Aliads were very destructive and killing all the humans, but then once the humans took over, they decided to return that in kind and be very prejudiced and killing all of the Aliads around them. And obviously Lord Falia loved his elven wife and family, and so wanted to protect them. But it's an interesting sort of darker side to Kvatch. And there's also sort of a longer chapter involving the Dark Brotherhood and ESO and Kvatch, which is really interesting, but kind of a another day kind of video. And another piece of history of Kvatch that we learn from a loading screen in Oblivion is about the statue of Antis Pinder in the center of the city. And it says that Antis Pinder led a hopeless defense against a superior force. Despite a grave defeat, his statue stands in Kvatch to honor his courage and spirit. And so it seems like we have a reason for why this statue of this guy is in the center of Kvatch, is that this guy, I guess, was a valiant defender of Kvatch, but unfortunately fell to a superior force, but they obviously want to remember his memory, so that's why they made the statue of him. I always like these little tidbits of lore. Basically, it gives you like a little bit of the history of Kvatch. It seems like Kvatch is a very strong and militarily well-equipped people, but I guess it doesn't matter how militarily well-equipped you are. If someone opens a great Oblivion gate in front of your city, you're probably fucked no matter what. So that's kind of how they ended up. But with the help of the hero of Kvatch and Salvian Martis and the Imperial Watch that come along the road when it's happening, all sort of are able to save the day and at least stop the siege where it was. It's always really interesting to see like how the history of all these towns comes about, and seeing that they're not just one-dimensional, oh, this town is just this. It has its own personality and character to it, and it's really interesting. So hopefully the Imperial coffers have enough money to help rebuild Kvatch and bring it back to where it was. So hopefully that everything will get back to where it was before. So hopefully all is well that ends well. And thanks for joining me on this lore deep dive. It would mean a lot if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me make more of these videos in the future. Thank you.